Galw'r aelodau I drefn. Yr eitem gyntaf yn agenda ni y prynawn yma yw'r cwestiynau i'r Prif Weinidog, ac mae'r cwestiwn cyntaf gan David Melding.
Will the First Minister make a statement on fire safety in high-rise blocks in Wales?
Well, our first priority after the Grenfell Tower tragedy has been to ensure residents of high-rise blocks are safe. We have provided £3 million to remove and replace cladding in the 3 social sector blocks affected, and we're working with private sector companies to establish their plans to complete the essential work.
First Minister, of course, I acknowledge the work that's been done in the social sector, and very welcome it is. But last month, Wales's Chief Fire Advisor said that residents in private high-rise blocks may have to live with unsafe cladding for years because of wrangling over who should pay for it. And the Residential Landlords Association has called on the Welsh Government to offer short-term loans to the privately owned buildings for remedial works while the issue of liability is sorted out. And do you, First Minister, agree with me that for the private sector, the priority should be to remove dangerous materials from these buildings, and the issues surrounding liability, contracts and responsibility should come later?
Well, usually the structure and exterior of a building are matters for the landlord. In the case of a high-rise building, it's usually the management company in normal circumstances. They are responsible. Now, there are private companies across Wales who are looking at the buildings that they own and are taking action in order to make them safer, and so they should. And I would urge those private companies who own buildings to do just that. They will have made a substantial amount of money in the main from those buildings. It's only right then that they contribute back to the upkeep of those buildings and not expect residents or tenants to pay.
Bethan Syed.
Just to expand on that point, I'm not entirely convinced that it's just as easy as saying that the management companies should pay, because some of these management companies have previously been made up of residents' associations, and that means by virtue of the setup, the constitution of those management bodies, that the residents themselves are the ones who will be paying. So, for example, in Prospect Place, you've got a mixture of people who are on benefits, you've got a mixture of professional people and elderly people. Some people will not be able to afford their contribution to that cladding. So again, I would ask you, what are the Welsh Government doing in addressing this issue with the private sector? In the UK Government, I'm not one to praise them very often, but they are having UK roundtables with the industry, telling them how they might address this issue, whereas I'm not seeing the same type of urgent action on the private cladding that I've seen elsewhere.
Well, no, that simply isn't correct. There have been meetings with organisations. You're right to say, of course, some management companies are made up entirely of residents within a building. They have to take on board the liabilities as well in those circumstances. It is an advantage to those who live in the building because they feel they have greater control over the communal areas of the building, but there are disadvantages, particularly when it comes to liability. We will, of course, work with residents' organisations. I can say that the Minister has already had a constructive meeting with representatives of the residents' management company, the developer and managing agents for a number of the buildings that we're talking about. We'll continue with those meetings to see what help could be provided where there is genuine difficulty, as far as some residents are concerned, in order to make buildings safer.
Question 2, Mark Reckless.
What steps will the Welsh Government take in response to the recommendations of the Children's, Young People and Education Committee's report, Mind Over Matter?
Well, our response was published on the 27th of June. It does recognise, of course, the original report, the progress that's been made, but there's no doubt that there's more that needs to be done to improve young people's mental health and well-being. And I can assure members that we will examine very carefully those recommendations we have accepted in principle and look very carefully at what more we might be able to do in order to provide assurances for the committee and the report that is produced.
First Minister, committee members from all parties, many education and health professionals, as well as school children, worked hard over many months to produce this report, Mind Over Matter. Our chair then met with you personally to ask you to lead a cross-government response, since we do need the Health Secretary to engage with our work as much as the Education Secretary. First Minister, what have you got to say to everyone who helped with our report, now that they see you've accepted only 7 of our 28 recommendations? 8 have been rejected, in whole or in part, while 13 have been described, and many regret Welsh Government's increasing use of this get-out phrase as just accepted in principle.
Well, My understanding is that the report makes one key recommendation and 27 separate recommendations. We have accepted fully or in part 23 of those recommendations. Now, it's important that where there has been acceptance in principle, that we look very carefully and seriously at how to implement or take forward those recommendations, and we will do that because we are aware, of course, that mental health is one of the key priority areas for us, identified in Prosperity for All.
Lynn Eagle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, you are very well aware of my deep concern about the Welsh Government response to Mind Over Matter. Now, I don't want to preempt the committee debate tomorrow because it wouldn't be possible to do this issue justice in a question. But can I just ask you to give me your assurance that you will very carefully consider what happens in that debate tomorrow with a view to ensuring that we do actually get the step change that we so desperately need for our children and young people?
Yes, I can give my friend and colleague that assurance. I know this is an issue that she has given a huge amount of commitment to, and I want to make sure that the government's response in the longer term is the kind of response that she would want to see, and other members of the committee. There will, of course, be a fuller debate tomorrow, and these issues can be explored in greater depth at that point.
Llyr Griffin.
Diolch Llywydd. Dwi'n hefyd eisiau cofrestru'n siom a gweud y gwir ar ymateb gwbl llipa y Llywodraeth I argymhellion yr adroddiad yma. Yn amlwg I fi, dyw'r Llywodraeth ddim yn rhannu'r un uchelgais ag aelodau y pwyllgor o safbwynt y newid trawsnewidiol sydd I angen yn y maes yma. Yn enwedig wrth edrych ar y trajectory o ran y cynnydd yn y broblem I ni weld, mae rhaid cwrdd ar her yna gyda llawer mwy o brwdfrydedd na derbyn mewn egwyddor sydd I fi yn cod yn aml iawn am fusnes fel arfer. Nawr, mae cael mwy nag un ysgrifennydd cabinet neu mwy nag un gweinidog yn gyfrifol am rhai meysydd weithiau'n gallu bod yn gryfder, ond I fi, yn yr achos yma, mae'n amlwg yn wendid oherwydd does dim un person yn cymeryd gafel, yn cymeryd perchnogaeth o'r gwelliannau a gyrru y newidiadau yna drwyddo. Felly gai ofyn anewch chi, fel prif weinidog, oherwydd natur y modd mae'r pwyllgor yn teimlo bod yn rhaid I hwnna fod yn blaenoriaeth genedlaethol, anewch chi gymeryd y rôl yna?
Wel, os ys eisiau rôl fawr I wneud hynny, fe na fi wrth gwrs. Fel rwy'n yn wedi gyda CAM sydd â profiad agos gyda CAMs a gwybod a gweld rai o'r problemau. Mae rhai bobl wedi cael ynglyn â'i plant yn enwedig. Mae hwn yn rhywbeth sydd we want sicrhau sy'n cael ei yrru ymlaen. Ond gael ddweud wrth aelodau hyn, byddai'n cymryd ystyriaeth wrth gwrs o'r ddadl y fori, ac wrth gwrs bydd y Llywodraeth yn ymateb fori a hefyd ar ôl fori mwyn sicrhau bod ni'n gallu cryfhau y gwasanaethau sydd ar gael I bobl.
Cwestiynau nawr gan arweinwyr y pleidiau ar ran yr wrthblaid, Paul Davies.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, this week is of course the 70th anniversary of the National Health Service, and I'm sure you'll join me in celebrating the service and the tireless work of health professionals who over the years have continued to deliver the best possible outcomes for patients across the UK. First Minister, in light of this significant milestone, are you ashamed to be the only leader of a UK nation to have ever cut an NHS budget?
Shame on you. Well, can I first of all pay just a word of tribute again to the member's predecessor, with whom I crossed swords for 7 years, I think, in this chamber. It went very quickly, I suspect, but could I wish him the best for the future as well, and to welcome a member for Presiding Officer back to the role that he occupied back in 2011 for a short period of time. And can I assure him we are proud of the record we have on the NHS. We are the party that established the NHS. We spend more on health per head than England does. We spend more on health and social care by some distance than England does. And if he is suggesting to me that somehow things are better under his government in London, I simply repeated him a sign I saw, which was very, which touched me, I think, in Tredegar on Sunday, and it's this: we have a statue to Aneurin Bevan, we'll never have a statue to Jeremy Hunt.
Well, of course, here he goes again, the First Minister, wanting to talk about England. He doesn't want to talk about Wales. You are the First Minister of Wales. Now, of course, perhaps the outgoing First Minister doesn't actually want to talk about financing the NHS in Wales, but at least the incoming First Minister is starting to accept his party's mistakes of the past. Only last week, at the WLJA conference in Llandudno, the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Services made it clear that it was a mistake to cut the health budget in 2011 when he said that, and I quote, "The cash flat budget settlement didn't work." First Minister, do you agree with him?
What I can say is we have put enormous resources into the health service now for many, many years. And it is perfectly proper for us to point out what he would do, his party would do, if they were in government in Wales. Because we have seen the example of what they've done in England, mass privatisation, a postcode lottery of... Yes, I know it hurts, but you've got to listen. A postcode lottery of treatment, privatisation, cuts in health spending in real terms, not keeping up with the health spending in Wales, massive cuts in social services. When they talk to their colleagues, their own party colleagues in local government, then we see what in England we will see from them and hear from them the devastating impact of his party's cuts in England that thankfully we have been able to prevent in Wales. And let's remember one thing. We have, for the past 8 years and more in this chamber, had to suffer the effects of austerity that has been imposed on the people of Wales by his own party. I would accept his criticism perhaps more favourably if he were to stand up today and demand that his own Prime Minister and what's left of her government end austerity in the UK.
Well, I'm not going to take any lectures on spending from the First Minister and indeed the Labour Party. It was the Labour Party which left a deficit of £150 billion back in 2010. And we all remember the former Labour Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Liam Byrne, who said there was no money left. This party has had to clear up that mess.
I think we all need to calm down a little bit and listen to Paul Davies.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, the effects of the cuts back in 2011 are still being felt by communities across Wales today. The starving of vital NHS funds in recent years has led to Betsy Cadwaladr Health Board in North Wales being put in special measures, the centralisation and downgrading of services at hospitals like Withybush in West Wales in my constituency, Health Board struggling and in some cases unable to break even, waiting times up, satisfaction rates down according to your own government's survey, and thousands of people across Wales are still struggling to access their GP. First Minister, the UK government has pledged a funding boost of £1.2 billion to the Welsh government every year for the next few years. Will you now commit to spending every penny of that funding on the NHS in Wales and give the Welsh Health Service the birthday present it so vitally deserves?
Well, he is more animated than I've seen in the past 11 years in this chamber. He doesn't need to audition for the job. No one else wants it at the end of the day. So, but let me say this to him again. He wants to avoid the austerity that his own party has imposed on the people of Britain. It is because of austerity that we find ourselves in a position where we would want to spend more money, more resources on health and other areas, but we are unable to do so. Once again, upon being given the invitation today to stand up and call for the end of austerity, once again he has failed. And, well, I say once again because he's the first one who's done it, but he has failed the people of Wales in terms of what he has done. And once again, he spreads this myth. He spreads this myth about a £1.2 billion consequential. That is not true. Let me explain why it's not true. What will happen is the consequential will come, and then there'll be cuts in other areas. There will be £1.2 billion. It will be far less than that. We know that because that's what's happened over the past few years. So what we will find is there may well be a consequential, but it will be far less than £1.2 billion because his party will make sure of that. His party will make sure of that. They will make cuts in local government, they will make cuts in other devolved areas, and they'll pass those cuts on to us and shave that figure of £1.2 billion down to something far, far less. So let's see if he wants the leadership of his party, whether he will stay today, that he will demand of his party in London that we should get a full £1.2 billion and more, just as they gave £1 billion to the 8 MPs from the DUP.
Arweinydd Plaid Cymru, Lian Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. In the 70th year of the NHS, it remains Wales's greatest invention. And it is, of course, the staff to which we owe the greatest gratitude. So I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone here when I say diolch o galon I chi gyd on behalf of all of us. Now, Wales's ageing population means that care services are unable to deal with the pressure that they're under, leading to thousands of unnecessary referrals to the NHS. It's in your gift, First Minister, to create the National Care Service that Plaid Cymru has been advocating for some time now, to alleviate that pressure. Will you do it?
Well, it's not clear what a National Care Service would do. It is right to say that there is still work to be done in aligning further the work of social services with health. We know there can't be a divorce between the two. The two run very much together. And that is what we are doing, working with our local government colleagues to make sure there are fewer people who are delayed in hospital, who are seeing delayed transfers of care go down, and also, of course, to work with primary care providers to make sure that they are able to provide the care that people need to avoid them going into hospital in the first place.
It's not happening quick enough, First Minister, and that's why we've advocated this National Care Service. Bold changes are needed for our health and social care services to reflect the changing demographics in this country. Bevan's bold vision saw the creation of the NHS, and a similar bold vision is needed now for a national care service. We can all agree that the NHS is a Welsh institution that is the envy of the world over, but Wales's place in the world is putting it under threat. Unlike the promises on the side of the famous big red bus, Brexit's danger for the NHS has come into sharp focus this week. NHS England's Chief Executive Officer, Simon Stevens, confirmed that there is extensive planning taking place for a no-deal Brexit. First Minister, can you tell us exactly what planning has been taking place here in Wales, in the Welsh NHS, for a no-deal Brexit scenario?
No amount of planning will help us to recruit doctors in the event of a no-deal Brexit. It's a disaster. In fact, people were told 2 years ago that it wouldn't happen, and now they're being softened up for a no-deal Brexit that will lead to many things, and she is right to point this out. Because what it would mean, it would be far more difficult to attract doctors and nurses into our health service, and every single health service in the Western world relies on medical staff from other countries, because they want to be able to attract the best wherever they are from. And the message that's being sent out from Britain at the moment is doctors and nurses from other countries are not welcome here. That somehow this is not the country to come to, it's too much bother to come to, too much bureaucracy in the future, and that is not what we want. A no-deal Brexit cannot be planned for, because if we can't attract doctors and nurses from other countries, we will not make up the numbers that we need in Wales. That's why we continue to fight, as she does, for a Brexit that is sensible and makes sure that the people of Wales don't suffer.
I'm really concerned that you have no plan for a no-deal Brexit, First Minister. They are planning for this in England. You should be planning for this here in Wales. Now, I know that we both want to see our NHS weather the Brexit storm. You are in a position to do something about it, though. I don't have faith in Westminster to ensure a steady hand on the tiller. No deal needs planning, and that planning needs to start now for the sake of patients and for staff. Now, one of the most startling revelations relates to our access to medicines post-Brexit. 37 million patient packets of medicines are imported into the UK from the EU every single month. Now, in a no-deal scenario, there is no guarantee about a single one of those packs. Medicines regulation is not a devolved matter, and NHS England has confirmed that they are preparing to stockpile medicines made outside the UK for English patients. That's what planning does. First Minister, are there specific Welsh contingency plans, or are you going to leave it up to the Department of Health in Whitehall to ensure that Welsh patients can access the treatments that they need post-Brexit? Yes, we will do what we have to do in order to cater for that scenario. But let's not pretend here that any of this is good. I mean, she makes the point that there is planning for a no-deal Brexit. There's no planning for a no-deal Brexit. It's more like people running around in circles screaming, because there are no plans at all for it. Let's look, for example, at the ports. Where are the plans to put in place the structure in the ports to deal with extra customs checks, possibly extra border controls, and the queues of lorries that would be created as a result, and the parking that would be created as a result of that? Nothing. There's no planning for it. The reason why no planning has been done on a no-deal Brexit in Whitehall is because they convinced themselves that the EU would crumble, and therefore there would be a deal. It would be an abject failure
on the part of Brexiteers, if having promised the people of Britain in 2016 that there would be a deal that the EU2 agreed to, that they then broke that promise 2 years on? They will have some explaining to do to the people of Britain.
Arweinydd Grŵp UKIP, Caroline Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, the whole of my region and communities breathed a sigh of relief when news broke of the deal being struck between Tata and ThyssenKrupp. It ended years of uncertainty for workers at Port Talbot and Deeside. So the Port Talbot works is to get one of its blast furnaces repaired, helping to guarantee the jobs of the thousands of employees until 2026. However, I note from the announcement that the firm only have an ambition to avoid compulsory redundancies until then. So it's clear that the sector still needs significant help if it is to succeed. First Minister, what additional support is the Welsh Government going to offer the steel sector in Wales in general and the Port Talbot plant in particular?
Well, a £60 million package that we've already alluded to in this chamber and outside. The UK Government have offered nothing, and there's been no interest at all from the UK Government for the past 2 years. There was, when David Cameron was there was interest, and I acknowledge that. Since then, nothing. I do, however, welcome the deal, and the unions have given it a welcome as well. I think we have to remember we have then the guarantee of no compulsory redundancies till 2026. We also have, of course, the promises in relation to Blast Furnace 5. 2 years ago, things were very bleak indeed. There was a real question mark as to whether the heavy end of Port Talbot could continue in the future. The plant was up for sale. We've come a huge way since then. Part of that is because of the work that we've put in as a government, the money we put on the table, the talking that's taken place, the engagement that we've had with Tata, and in the 2 years since 2016, when things looked very difficult indeed, we now have, let's not pretend that things are at the woods yet, but we now have as our steel industry in a far stronger position than it was then.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. The UK Government does indeed have a lot more to do for this sector. This strategy to use 3 million tonnes of steel in the next 5 years on infrastructure projects like HS2, Hinkley C and the upgrading of the UK motorways. But this doesn't go far enough because every single infrastructure project should be using UK steel. And every defence project should be using Welsh and UK steel. And every publicly funded and supported project should also be using UK steel. So has your government suggested this in your discussions with the UK government? We can't afford to lose our steel industry because of the short-sightedness of government policy. It is of strategic importance to our nation that we maintain steel production here in the UK, which means here in Wales. First Minister, is your government considering other ways to support the sector in Wales, perhaps looking at a tidal lagoon at Port Talbot, which will help to reduce energy costs for the plant?
Well, I think we have to be careful here because the steel industry, like other industries, does depend on an export market. If we actually say to other countries only steel from Britain is allowed to be used in Britain, they'll say, well, tough, you're not entering our markets either. So we have to be very careful about what we do. What we do need to do, of course, is to make sure that our procurement policy is as strong as it can be as far as using Welsh steel. We also need to make sure, of course, that we support the industry to become stronger in terms of exporting. And certainly a small but significant amount of steel is exported to the US, where the tariffs now have made it, well, not so much difficult for Welsh steel, but more expensive for their buyers in the US. So we've just got to be very careful here in saying, well, if it's only British steel from Britain used in British projects, well, other countries will then take the same attitude, and we must be careful not to cut ourselves off from the export market.
Thank you, First Minister. While the steel industry is of national and strategic importance, we can't ignore the impact that it has on our environment. Living in the shadow of the Port Talbot plant, I see on a daily basis the effect the steelworks has on the environment, with huge plumes of acrid orange smoke released into the air that we breathe, and thick layers of dust covering everything from our cars to our windows. So it's little wonder that Port Talbot has been ranked as one of the most polluted towns in the UK. It is not as bad as it once was, because gone are the days of the acid rain. However, the impact on human health is still present and still a threat. So, First Minister, what actions will your government be taking to ensure that investment at the plant doesn't come at a cost to human lives?
Well, I think in fairness to Tata, they have certainly improved the situation in terms of emissions over many years, including looking, of course, at reusing the gas that is flared for energy in the plant. Inevitably, where there's a steelworks, that will have an effect on air quality. But the key is, of course, to make sure that effect is minimised over the years. But Talbot also, of course, has a very congested stretch of motorway, which is well below the standard that would be built these days. And it's a problem that's not easy to resolve, because it would take a significant amount of money to resolve the issue by looking purely at a road-based solution in Port Talbot. But we want to make sure that we work with Tata, and Tata have been doing this anyway over the years, that the steelworks reduces its emissions, which it has done, as the members recognised, and to continue that trend in the future.
Question 3, David Rees.
What proposals does the Welsh Government have for improving public transport in areas that will not be served by the South Wales Metro?
Well, the new contract for rail services does include a number of proposals for improvements to public transport in each region of Wales. They include proposals that will accelerate delivery of the North East Wales Metro, and also funding to develop a South West Wales Metro as well.
Well, thank you for that answer, First Minister. As you're aware, there are many valleys which are not going to be served by the South Wales Metro, including the Avon Valley. And I've received a petition from residents in the Avon Valley concerned about the bus services in the Avon Valley and the reduction in services. In fact, we have Abergwynfi and Blaengwynfi served every 2 hours, so as Glencorrwg, and you can't even get to Glencorrwg by bus after 5:15 in the evening. Now, this is going to have an impact upon lives, because this is an area where a large proportion of people don't own cars and rely upon public transport. What can the Welsh Government do to ensure that it gets equal treatment in the areas that have been served by Metro, so it can have services which will deliver for them, get them to hospital, get them to appointments, get them to the services they need to get to?
Well, I can give the member 2 assurances. First of all, we are looking at potential legislation to start to regulate bus services again in Wales, because, as I said in this chamber before, there are many members in this chamber who will have complaints brought to them about bus services that we can do nothing about, because they're private companies, apart from the subsidised services, private companies who can do pretty much as they want. You know, I had unhappy dealings with the Transport Commissioner years ago when that person was based in Birmingham, where not much was done. So we will have greater control, and we can obviously look at sharing that control with local government over the next few years. Secondly, to re-emphasise the point, the Metro is not just about vehicles that run on rails, if I can put it that way. It is about buses as well. And it means, if we're going to have a properly integrated transport system, that the bus services link in with, for example, the Talbot Parkway station, and that people see that they have a seamless, integrated public transport system. And buses are very much part of that, and buses in the Avon Valley will be part of that as well.
Russell George.
George Flower. Since 2010, spending on bus provision by the Welsh Government has fallen by 20%, and the number of registered bus services in Wales continues to fall. This is certainly having an effect right across Wales, but particularly in rural Wales, I'd suggest. So can I ask, First Minister, what are you doing to solve this crisis in Wales? And do you agree with me that what passengers in Wales want is a cleaner, safer and more reliable, especially bus service, bus network, which is valued and funded properly by the Welsh Government?
Oh, yeah, good question. You privatised the buses, well, not him personally, but his party, and said it would be marvellous, there'd be competition, whereas in fact across most of Wales what we have is a private monopoly, where in reality there's no competition at all. Secondly, I have to point out to him, when it comes to promises on transport, his own party has a poor record. Where, for example, is the electrification to Swansea that was promised by one Conservative Prime Minister, and that promise was then reneged on by another Conservative Prime Minister. He also fails again to point out the effect of austerity, as if, since 2010, we have had a tranche of money provided for us every year to spend as we want, and we are therefore swimming in notes. We are not. His party has made sure that public spending has been cut across the whole of the UK. But despite those challenges, we have maintained the bus services support grant allocations to local authorities at £25 million per year. It is for each local authority to determine which bus and community transport services to support using that grant. So if there is a service that should be subsidised, then the first protocol for the member is his own local authority.
Heaven David.
What assurances can the First Minister give that the new major critical care hospital, the Grange near Cymraeg, will be accessible by public transport for all parts of the Caerphilly constituency by the time the hospital opens?
Yes, it won't be a service that runs on rails, if I can put it that way, thinking of light rail or heavy rail, but buses. It'll be hugely important. We understand the importance of this, that the hospital is served by an efficient and widespread bus network that does connect with wider rail services where people need that. So yes, public transport and the ease of public transport is a hugely important part of the planning for the hospital.
Cwestiwn 4, Simon Thomas.
A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog datganiad yn dyfodol yn un môr yng Nghymru.
Mae'n cydnabod potensial yn i'r môr ar gyfer creu yn carbon eisiau a darparu manteision economaidd a chymdeithasol i'n cymunedau arfordirol. Mae polisi y Llywodraeth Cymru wedi helpu i gyflwyno cyfres o dechnolegau yn i'r môr a fyddwn ni'n parhau weithio i wireddu'r cyfleoedd sy'n gysylltiedig â'r sector hwn.
Diolch i Prif Weinidog. Award Siom y wythnos diwetha, oedd e'n faf i ymweld â Ynys Môn gyda fi na Piorweth dydd Gwener a gweld nifer o gynlluniau cyffroes yn ymwneud yn ei môr yn ei bennaf Minesto sydd newydd lawnsio ei dyfais yn ei llanw yn y harbwr yn Caergybi. Nawr, y cwestiwn sy'n codi yw, a yw'r 200 miliwn oedd chi fel Llywodraeth wedi neilltuo i gefnogi un cynllun benodol ar gyfer y molyn llanw yn Bai Abertawe, nawr y gael ar gyfer ddychwynt o datblygiadau yn ei môr, megis yn Ynys Môn, neu y gael ar gyfer cynllun newydd molyn debygol yn Bai Abertawe. Be ydych chi'n bwriadu wneud i arwain datblygiad yn y maes yma?
Mae'n wir i weid bod y swm o arian yna ddim yn swm oedd wedi penodi yn uniongyrchol i Abertawe, bod eisiau ar y pryd, a ni yn ystyried ar mha ffyrdd allwn ni i helpu technolegau ar draws Cymru, yn enwedig y morlun yn y gogledd, mwyn gweld beth allwn ni neu fel Llywodraeth mwyn cefnogi'r technoleg. Ond mae rhaid i ni ystyried, wrth gwrs, ynglyn a'r arian mawr, sef yr arian byddai Llywodraeth Senedd wedi gallu dod i mewn i forlun Abertawe, er enghraifft, mae hwnna'n rhywbeth sydd heb wedi datganoli. Ond mae'n wir i weid, ni'n dal i ystyried mha ffyrdd allwn ni i gefnogi'r technolegau yn y pen draw.
Susie Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. Well, First Minister, this puts you in a bit of a quandary, I think, because, of course, we heard offers put forward for a new Swansea Bay Lagoon over the weekend, and while there are obviously questions about that, about why they didn't put this offer forward sooner and whether the figures stack up, you did offer £200 million to support a Swansea Bay Lagoon on projects, on figures that actually proved unworkable in the end. So what figures would you be looking for to persuade you? They were the same figures you had. No, we had the same figures. So what figures would persuade you to consider keeping the offer on the table for Swansea Bay?
I owe an apology to Paul Davis. There is another candidate who's just thrown her hat into the ring. I'm sorry for that, but we can see the evidence there. Look, the reality is that the failure of the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon is entirely in the hands of the UK government. I mean, she talks of the figures. We don't accept the figures. Bear in mind that these figures were deemed unworkable by the very same people who got the figures for Hinckley wrong in the first place. So why should we then trust the figures, trust the view of the UK government? And let's bear in mind, all we asked for was the same treatment as Hinckley. That was it. Now, if she is saying the figures for Hinckley were wrong, then that is something for the UK government to explain. We just wanted the same warranty for Wales as Hinckley got, and we were let down once again.
Cwestiwn 5, Sian Gwenllian.
A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am raglen ddeddfwriaethol Llywodraeth Cymru?
Wel, byddwn ni'n gwneud datganiad blynyddol am y rhaglen ddeddfwriaethol cyn toriad yr haf.
Drwch yn ymlaen i gael hwnna felly, ond mae Gweinidog y Gymraeg, Eluned Morgan, wedi datgan i bod hi am wthio'r cynigion ar gyfer bil y Gymraeg yn ei blaen, fel rhan o'r rhaglen honno. Prif fyrdwn y cynigion rheini, wrth gwrs, ydy ysgogi newid cyfeiriad llwyr ym mholisi iaith y Llywodraeth, gwanio hawliau, sgrapio'r comisiynydd a mynd â ni nôl i fframwaith gyfreithiol deddf fethiedig 1993. Pa dystiolaeth sydd ar gael i gefnogi cynigion y Llywodraeth? A newch chi oedi cyn cyflwyno bil newydd ar y Gymraeg mwyn cynnal adolygiad cynhwysfawr o'r achos dros fil newydd? Ac onyd ydy hi'n berffaith glir erbyn hyn. Mae cryfhau nid gwanio deddfwriaeth sydd ei angen yn sgil yr ymysodiad diweddara ar yr iaith Gymraeg gan Treigo Mills?
Wel, wy'n rhannu yr anhapusrwydd ynglyn â beth wedodd Treigo Mills gyda hi, wrth gwrs, a bab arall dwi'n gweithio yn y siambr hyn. Nod y bil yw cryfhau y strwyth y cyfreithiwr ynglyn â'r iaith Gymraeg, a nid i wanhau. Gyda'r system sydd gyda ar hyn o bryd, a wedi gyda'r deddfwriaeth sydd gyda ar hyn o bryd, dwi ddim yn amlwg i fi bod y deddfwriaeth yn digon clir, a hefyd bod y deddfwriaeth yn digon cryf mwyn hybu'r Gymraeg yn y pen draw. A mae'n holl bwysig hefyd, wrth gwrs, i ystyried pa fath o fframwaith deddfwriaethol dyle fod, ond hefyd ystyried am ha ffordd allan ni beswadio mwy o bobl i ddefnyddio'r Gymraeg. O'n i ddim ne, fi'n clywed bod gwyl y tafwyl wedi tynnu 20,000 o bobl mewn i Gaerdydd dros y penwythnos. Mae hwnna'n enghraifft da i fi o'r ffordd allwch chi beswadio bobl i ddefnyddio'r Gymraeg, i gael agwedd da tuag at y Gymraeg. A felly mae fi'n bwysig, wrth gwrs, i ystyried am ha ffyrdd allwch ni gryfhau'r deddfwriaeth a gyfraith, ond hefyd mae'n holl bwysig i ystyried ffyrdd allwch ni i helpu beswadio bobl, jyst mwyn i'n sy'n cael sbri yn yr iaith Gymraeg.
Andrew Watty-Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's always good to get a cheer. Thank you first. First Minister, could I thank you for the very kind comments, with your indulgence, Presiding Officer, for the very kind comments you expressed last week, and also to members across the Chamber who have been very kind over the last couple of days in the comments that they have made on my departure from office. But I certainly look forward to challenging the government, and I have a different view sitting here now of the Labour backbenches. I can see the whole backbench now, I can. But I would like to ask you on the legislative programme. I visited a charity in Cardiff North recently, Tomorrow's Generation, and they specialise in providing support with children who suffer with dyslexia in mainstream education. And they made the point that in many countries across Europe, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Italy, Switzerland and in England, the legislative framework that puts rights to children who are diagnosed with dyslexia is far stronger. Could I encourage you to have a look at the legislative framework that is available here in Wales, compare it to other examples in Europe, and if there does need to be a tightening of that legislative framework, that those changes are made and the government bring forward the proposals. I can see the Cabinet Secretary saying it is not. I'm just conveying the message that was put to me by the charity. If it is not, then great, but if the changes do need to be made, then I'd hope the government would consider them.
Well, I mean, first of all, the reception he had there from his own benches was substantial, and it shows they miss him already, I suspect. But secondly, he raises an important point. If you would allow me to look at this issue and write to him with a substantive answer, he can then convey that answer to those who have expressed their concerns.
Cwestiwn 6, Neil McAvoy.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's efforts to encourage the UK Government to rebalance its spending on infrastructure?
Well, infrastructure investment is vital to the prosperity of the whole of the UK, and I'll continue to press the UK Government to ensure Wales gets its fair share.
First Minister, I hope you enjoyed the secret ceremony you attended this week to rename the second Severn crossing the Prince of Wales Bridge, against the wishes of the overwhelming majority of people in Wales who were not even invited. It took
I do want to hear Neil McAvoy's question.
It took freedom of information requests to reveal how desperate you were to go to the unpopular ceremony and how cosy your relationship is with Alan Cairns. Last week, you voted against a motion of no confidence in the Secretary of State, even though key Conservative manifesto promises were broken, including rail electrification between Cardiff and Swansea. So I wonder, when you were quaffing drinks with Cairns and royalty, if you spoke about the report from the Transport Committee in Westminster that exposed how Wales is sidelined on infrastructure spending and made clear that decisions will always favour London. The report showed how absurd it was to cancel much-needed infrastructure projects in Wales at the same time as billions of pounds of expenditure was announced for London. Now, nothing is being done by Cairns. Whilst money is thrown at the south east of England, yet cuts for Wales.
You do need to come to a question now, Neil
McAvoy. The Secretary of State is starting to be an embarrassment to our country, as well as stopping us developing our economy. So, this is a question, hopefully this week it could be understood. How could you... Thank you. How could you vote very simple question to answer this week. How could you vote last week against a motion of no confidence in the Secretary of State for Wales? It's very simple.
Explain during the debate.
In 2 minutes and 5 seconds, because I looked at the clock, the member managed to take an issue on which I agree with him quite substantially and present it in such a ham-fisted way as to annoy almost everyone in the chamber. That is his talent. I understand that. But I have to say that we will always fight to make sure that Wales gets its fair share of infrastructure investment. We do not have a fair share at the moment. And he mentions a secret ceremony, so secret, in fact, that I wasn't even at it. But there we are, and he will see coverage of it on the news in any event. But certainly I share his desire to make sure that Wales does get the promises that it has been given in the past kept in terms of electrification and in terms, of course, of seeing more money made available for the infrastructure that we need in Wales.
Nick Ramsey.
I was just about to ask you, First Minister, how you managed to wangle an invite to this secret ceremony that I didn't get invited to either, but you've taken the wind out my sails on that one. Would you say the question about the... And there's always the Alan Davis Road going from Bryn Mawr to Abergavenny, isn't there? Maybe when you're First Minister, we'll see that as well, Alan. But the question about the name of the bridge, I'm getting to a question. The question about the name of the bridge has been raised many times, but isn't it more important, First Minister, that the tolls on that bridge have been reduced and are going to be abolished later this year? Whatever you think about the name of the bridge, some are for that, some are against it, isn't it a fact that people are now going to enter Wales and leave Wales without paying what many have called in this chamber a tax over so many years? That's to be welcomed. That's because of this UK government.
I do welcome the removal of the tolls, and it's about time too. People have been paying for many, many, many years, probably beyond the cost of the bridge since it was built in 1996. So I share his congratulation, if that is the word for the UK government, for lifting the tolls, but it's taken long enough. I mean, the reduction of the tolls was due entirely to the fact that VAT was no longer chargeable on them. It wasn't some kind of largesse the UK government provided in terms of the tolls themselves. But yeah, there are opportunities now, of course, for us to remove what has been a psychological barrier to investors who are looking at Wales, and make sure that we continue with our great success that we've had with foreign direct investment and improve those figures over the next few years.
Question 7, Vicky Howells.
How is the Welsh Government supporting the cooperative and mutual sector to improve outcomes for children and young people?
Well, the Mapping the Social Business Sector in Wales report notes that the sector is now worth an incredible £2.37 billion to Wales, and provides jobs and volunteering opportunities to around 100,000 people. I'm sure the member would agree that the sector, of course, makes a valuable contribution to our society.
Thank you, First Minister, and I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I recently visited Cylch Maithrin Serinfach in Mountain Ash in my constituency, a registered childcare provider. They're supported by the Cooperative Centre and achieved really positive results in their recent ESTIN and CSSIW inspections. As we're in cooperative fortnight, and with improving childcare being such an important Welsh Government goal for this term, how is Welsh Government supporting the establishment of childcare providers on a cooperative model, which in turn brings so many additional benefits to local economies?
Well, I can begin by saying that to date, Social Business Wales has provided support to help the group develop a business plan, a sustainability and environment policy, an eco-code and a sustainability health check, and we do refer any individual looking to establish a cooperative model to Social Business Wales, because we want to make sure we create the right support that's needed, both through Business Wales, Social Business Wales, ourselves and WEFO, to make sure that worthwhile projects such as this are able to flourish in the future.
Darren Miller.
Thank you. Can I ask you, First Minister, it's not only organisations like the ones described by Vicky Howells, cooperatives and mutuals, which are supporting education. There are a wealth of charities also which are involved in giving support to our education system. Groundwork North Wales, for example, providing education to young people on environmental issues. You've got North Wales Super Kids charity that's doing a great work with people across North Wales, covering communities from Holyhead all the way down to Wrexham. And of course, Big Ideas Wales, who encourage enterprise in our schools by getting business people into those schools in order to encourage young people to be entrepreneurs. What support is the Welsh Government giving to them in order to foster that sort of approach so that young people can have the opportunities that they might not have otherwise?
Well, core funding for social enterprise support in this financial year has been awarded to the Wales Cooperative Centre and Social Firms Wales. They support the delivery of our objectives to develop the social enterprise market and to provide bespoke specialist business support to social enterprises. Those who are not social enterprises, of course, there are other areas of support that are available. And of course, as I mentioned earlier on, we do provide support, funding rather, towards the £11 million ERDF-supported Social Business Wales project.
Question 8, Mike Hedges.
Diolch. Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's efforts to tackle poverty?
Well, we're committed to improving outcomes for future generations through investment in early years and increasing prosperity for all by focusing on employability and economics.
Can I thank the First Minister for that response? Many of my constituents are facing a financial crisis during the summer holidays, having to find 10 extra meals per child for 6 weeks. Whilst Caroline Harris MP is providing food for some children for 2 weeks of the holidays, there will be substantial unmet need. Faith in the community has met some of that need, but the closure of Community First puts the continuation of lunches and breakfasts in some of our poorest communities in jeopardy. Will the Welsh Government investigate the cost of continuing free breakfast and free school meals for those eligible during the school summer holidays?
Well, we have made available a grant of £500,000 per annum to the WRJ since 2017 to support the programme Food and Fun, Bwyd a Hwyl. Last year, it ran in 38 schools covering 12 local authorities and all 7 local health boards, with approximately 1,500 children benefiting from the programme. The 2018 programme is anticipated to run in approximately 60 schools. It will cover 16 local authorities and, again, all LHB areas. The indications are that an estimated 3,000 learners will attend the scheme this summer.
Okay, the First Minister will be aware of the comprehensive report published yesterday by the Wales Centre for Public Policy entitled The Welsh Tax Base, Risks and Opportunities for Fiscal Devolution. I don't expect he's read it all overnight, but in it, innovative approaches are suggested for aggressive taxes, particularly council tax. And as we know, people living in the lowest valued properties pay nearly 5% of the worth of their house in council tax, whilst people living in the most expensive properties pay as little as 0.25%. But the report crucially suggests that we take a holistic approach to taxation and fiscal policy generally, rather than looking at individual taxes in isolation. The report says tax reform should be pursued in an integrated way. For example, a more progressive approach to council tax could be linked to changes in land transaction tax or income tax rate. Is that approach supported by the First Minister?
I think that there is a great deal of scope over the next few years to examine models such as that. At the moment, of course, 2 taxes are devolved. Income tax will soon follow. I think, first of all, it's important to bed the system in. But I do think there is the opportunity for debate across political parties and in political parties to see what kind of tax system we would want in Wales. There are positives and negatives. The council tax, of course, we know that there are some people who pay a high level of council tax whose incomes are actually quite low. We know as well, of course, that with things like a local income tax, the question then arises of do you pay where you live or do you pay where you work? These things have to be looked at carefully, and I'm sure they'll form part of the debate over the next few years.
Finally, Mark Ashwood.
Well, after two decades of Labour government in Wales, Joseph Rowntree Foundation's Poverty in Wales 2018 report found the proportion of households living in income poverty in Wales remained higher than England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and that poverty among couples with children had been rising since 2003-06. In that context, how do you respond to the statement by the Bevan Foundation that if people feel that policies are imposed on them, the policies don't work, and that a new Tackling Poverty programme should not be directed top-down?
I always think that listening to the Conservatives talking about poverty is a bit like somebody trying to stand up on a paddleboard without falling off into the sea of austerity that's gathered around it. The reality is that it is his party that has done so much to cut the incomes of our poorest people. How can we rest as a society when we know that in England there are nurses who have to go to food banks? We should say to people, if you get a job, you'll be better off That's no longer the case. We've seen in-work benefits cut. We've seen tax cuts for those who earn the most. And then we have Conservative politicians wondering why levels of poverty have gone up. Yes, we have, of course, our plans to tackle poverty, but we do need a change of government in London. So we have a government that is far more committed to a more equal society.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog. Yr eitem nesaf felly o fusnes.